Captain Jessica Chun straightened her uniform as she approached Admiral Richardson's office at Naval Air Station, Oceana. The morning briefing had been routine, nothing suggesting this meeting would be anything beyond her requested transfer to the Pentagon liaison position. She knocked twice on the heavy oak door and entered when summoned. Admiral Richardson sat behind his massive desk, her personnel file spread before him like evidence at a trial. His weathered face showed no warmth as he gestured to the chair across from him. "Take a seat, Captain. We need to discuss your future with this command." Jessica settled into the chair, noting the formal tone. The Admiral's eyes scrutinized her compact frame with obvious skepticism. She had endured such looks throughout her career, colleagues questioning how someone barely 5'4" could handle the physical demands of flying an F-22 Raptor. The Admiral slid a document across the polished surface. "After careful review of your recent psychological evaluations and performance metrics, I've determined you're no longer suitable for active flight operations. These are your discharge papers, effective immediately." Jessica's breath caught as she scanned the official letterhead. "Sir, with respect, I've maintained exemplary flight status. My last evaluation showed superior ratings in all categories. There must be some mistake in the documentation." The Admiral leaned back, his expression hardening. "Captain, your size alone raises questions about your ability to withstand forces during high-stress maneuvers. Add the recent reports of insubordination during joint exercises, and the picture becomes clear. The Navy requires pilots who can follow orders without question." Jessica felt heat rising in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. "Admiral, I've logged over 2,000 hours in the F-22 with 0 incidents. My call sign wasn't earned through politics, but through proven performance in classified operations that required split-second decision-making under extreme conditions." Admiral Richardson waved dismissively at Jessica's protests. "Your so-called classified operations are likely exaggerated in your file. Half these young pilots inflate their records to advance their careers. The reality is that modern fighter aircraft require physical capabilities you simply don't possess." Jessica maintained her composure despite the insult. "Sir, the F-22's fly-by-wire system compensates for pilot input regardless of physical size. My proficiency scores in both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions exceed squadron averages. I've successfully completed vertical climbs to 50,000 feet and sustained 9 G-turns during combat air patrol missions." The Admiral's laugh held no humor. "Anyone can memorize technical specifications, Captain. Real combat requires instinctive reactions and physical endurance that, frankly, looking at you, seem questionable. Your transfer request to the Pentagon confirms you're looking for an easy desk job away from real flying." 2 security personnel entered the office without knocking. The Admiral nodded toward Jessica. "Escort Captain Chun to process her discharge. Make sure she turns in all classified materials and base access credentials before departing the installation." Jessica stood slowly, her mind racing through proper discharge procedures. "Admiral, military regulation requires a formal review board for involuntary separations of officers with active flight status. This discharge violates established protocols for personnel with my clearance level and operational experience." The larger security guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to move this along. The Admiral has other appointments, and processing takes time. Your personal effects are already being packed from your quarters." As they walked through the corridor, Jessica noticed junior officers watching from doorways. Lieutenant Morrison from her former squadron shook his head with apparent disgust. Hard to believe they let someone that small fly our most advanced fighter jets. No wonder the program has equipment issues when pilots can barely reach the controls properly. His companion nodded agreement. These diversity initiatives compromise mission readiness. Real pilots need the physical presence to command respect from ground crews and allied forces during joint operations. The security detail led Jessica through the main hangar where maintenance crews worked on parked F-22 Raptors. Chief Petty Officer Davis looked up from a hydraulic system diagnostic and smirked. There goes another wannabe pilot who couldn't handle real aircraft. These fancy college graduates think flying simulators prepares them for actual combat operations. His crew laughed as they continued their work. Sergeant Williams wiped grease from his hands and called out loudly, "Hey, Captain, maybe the civilian airlines need someone who can fit in those tiny cockpits. Commercial jets, probably more your speed anyway." Jessica bit back her response, knowing that engaging would only provide more ammunition for her discharge proceedings. The security guards seemed to enjoy the public humiliation, walking slowly to maximize her exposure to the mocking comments from base personnel. As they approached the administrative building, Master Sergeant Rodriguez stepped into their path. Well, the mighty F-22 pilot finally getting shown the door. About time someone recognized that just because you can memorize flight manuals doesn't mean you belong in a $150 million aircraft. The younger guard nodded enthusiastically. "Sergeant, you should have seen her trying to argue with Admiral Richardson about regulations and procedures, acting like she knows better than senior command about proper military protocol." Rodriguez crossed his arms and studied Jessica with obvious disdain. These new pilots think their fancy flight school certificates make them experts. Real aviators earn respect through years of proven performance, not by checking diversity boxes on promotion boards. The administrative clerk behind the processing desk barely looked up as they entered. "Another early discharge, I see. Getting pretty common these days with all the lowered standards. Just sign here, and initial there. Your final pay will be mailed to your home address." Jessica reviewed the paperwork carefully, noting several procedural irregularities that violated standard discharge protocols. "Ma'am, this documentation lacks required signatures from my squadron commander and the base legal officer. Military regulations clearly state that involuntary separations require proper chain of command authorization." The clerk rolled her eyes impatiently. "Lady, just sign the papers and move along. We've got real business to handle today." The piercing wail of emergency klaxons suddenly filled the administrative building, cutting through the routine discharge proceedings. Red warning lights flashed throughout the corridors as the base-wide alert system activated. Jessica instinctively straightened, her training kicking in despite her civilian status. The duty officer's voice crackled over the intercom system. "All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple unidentified aircraft approaching restricted airspace from Bering to Savenzaro. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Through the office windows, Jessica watched ground crews scrambling toward the flight line. F-22 Raptor engines began their distinctive whine as pilots rushed through abbreviated pre-flight procedures. The controlled chaos of a military base responding to potential threats unfolded with practiced efficiency. The administrative clerk abandoned her paperwork and rushed toward the Emergency Coordination Center. The security guards looked uncertain, caught between completing Jessica's escort and responding to the developing crisis. The larger guard spoke into his radio, requesting instructions from command. Control tower communications filled the air through open radio channels. "Tower to Falcon Leader, expedite your takeoff sequence. We have 4 bogies at Angels 20, closing fast on restricted airspace. Standard intercept protocols are authorized." Jessica listened carefully to the radio chatter, her experienced ear detecting subtle tension in the controller's voice. The approaching aircraft were not responding to identification requests, and their flight pattern suggested deliberate probing of defense systems rather than navigation errors. Within minutes, 2 F-22s roared down the runway and climbed steeply toward the threat. Jessica tracked their departure, noting the aggressive climb rate and the pilot's immediate turn toward the intercept heading. The base's remaining aircraft began emergency startup procedures as backup support. The radio crackled again with increasing urgency. "Falcon Leader to Tower. We have visual contact with unknown aircraft. They appear to be military configuration, but showing no identification markings. Requesting guidance on rules of engagement parameters." Tower responded with measured authority. Falcon leader. Maintain safe distance and attempt radio contact on guard frequency. Use standard identification procedures. Do not engage unless directly threatened or ordered by command authority. Jessica frowned as she monitored the communications. Something about the intercept procedure seemed off, but as a discharged officer, she had no authority to intervene in operational matters. The situation deteriorated rapidly as Falcon leader's voice returned over the radio with obvious strain. Tower, we're experiencing complete communication failure with the bogies. They're not responding to any frequency, including emergency channels. These aircraft are definitely military-grade, possibly foreign design. Jessica watched through the window as ground personnel rushed between aircraft, their movements sharp with military precision. The remaining F-22s showed signs of rush preparation, with external power units still connected and maintenance crews working frantically to complete pre-flight inspections. The tower controller's voice carried new tension. Falcon leader, be advised that headquarters is requesting immediate identification of aircraft type and probable origin. Can you provide visual confirmation of weapon systems or national markings? Static filled the radio channel before Falcon leader responded. Tower, negative on visible markings, but these birds are carrying external ordnance. I count multiple missile pods and what appears to be electronic warfare equipment. They're maintaining formation at our 6 o'clock, matching our every maneuver. Jessica's blood chilled as she recognized the tactical implications. The unknown aircraft were demonstrating classic shadowing behavior, staying in the F-22's blind spots while gathering intelligence on their capabilities and response patterns. This wasn't random airspace violation. The administrative building's emergency coordinator burst through the door, his face flushed with exertion. All non-essential personnel need to evacuate to designated shelters immediately. We have potential hostile aircraft in restricted airspace, and Command is implementing threat condition Charlie protocols. The security guards looked between Jessica and their radios, clearly uncertain about their priorities. The coordinator noticed their hesitation and pointed toward the exit. Everyone out now. This includes discharge processing and administrative functions. As they moved toward the shelter areas, Jessica heard the tower attempting to establish communication with backup pilots. Tower to Falcon 3. Are you ready for emergency scramble? We may need additional interceptors if the situation escalates beyond current threat assessment parameters. The response came with mechanical precision. Falcon 3 ready for takeoff, but we're still running system diagnostics on primary navigation equipment. Estimated ready time is 12 minutes for full operational capability. Jessica recognized the problem immediately. 12 minutes was far too long if the unidentified aircraft decided to take aggressive action against the current interceptors. The emergency shelter buzzed with nervous chatter as base personnel monitored the developing crisis through portable radio units. Jessica positioned herself near the communications equipment, her training compelling her to stay informed about the tactical situation despite her discharge status. Falcon leader's voice cut through the static with increasing urgency. Tower, the bogies just broke formation and are taking aggressive positioning. They've locked onto us with targeting radar. I'm detecting multiple missile guidance systems painting our aircraft. The tower controller's response reflected growing concern. Falcon leader, you are cleared to take evasive action. Maintain visual contact, but do not engage unless fired upon. Falcon 3, what's your status on emergency scramble? Falcon 3 responded with frustration evident in his voice. Tower, we're still showing hydraulic pressure warnings on the flight control system. Maintenance is trying to clear the fault, but we need at least 8 more minutes before we can safely launch. Jessica stepped closer to the radio operator, her concern overriding protocol. Sergeant, are they following standard threat escalation procedures? The intercept pattern they're using suggests this might require specialized engagement protocols. The radio operator looked at her with confusion. Ma'am, you're not supposed to be monitoring tactical communications. Please step back and let trained personnel handle this situation. Before Jessica could respond, Admiral Richardson's voice boomed over the command frequency. All units, this is Admiral Richardson assuming tactical command. I want those hostile aircraft identified and neutralized immediately. Use whatever force necessary to protect this installation. Jessica's eyes widened as she recognized the dangerous implications of the Admiral's order. The current rules of engagement required specific threat confirmation before authorizing weapons release, and the Admiral was essentially ordering preemptive strikes against unidentified aircraft. Falcon Leader's voice returned with obvious confusion. Admiral, requesting clarification on engagement authority. The bogies haven't fired on us yet, and we haven't confirmed hostile intent beyond aggressive positioning. The Admiral's response was sharp and immediate. Falcon Leader, I don't need confirmation from pilots about threat assessment. You have your orders. Engage those aircraft before they can strike our base facilities. Jessica realized the Admiral was about to authorize an engagement that violated established military protocols and could potentially start an international incident if the aircraft belonged to Allied forces conducting training exercises. Jessica could no longer remain silent as she heard the Admiral's dangerous orders echoing through the communications system. She stepped forward and addressed the radio operator directly. Sergeant, I need immediate access to the tactical frequency. The Admiral is about to authorize an engagement that violates current rules of engagement protocols. The radio operator hesitated, glancing between Jessica and the security guards who had been escorting her. Ma'am, you're not authorized for tactical communications. You're being discharged from this base today. Jessica's voice carried unmistakable authority as her training took over. Sergeant, under military regulation 5-7-3, any qualified officer can assume emergency communications responsibility during imminent threat situations. Hand me that microphone immediately. Before anyone could stop her, Jessica grabbed the radio handset and keyed the transmission. Falcon Leader, this is Phoenix. Abort engagement immediately. You are not authorized to fire on unidentified aircraft without confirmed hostile action under current threat condition Charlie protocols. The shelter fell silent as everyone stared at Jessica. Her call sign had been transmitted with such natural authority that even the security guards seemed frozen in place, uncertain whether to intervene. Falcon Leader's response came with obvious relief. Phoenix, confirm your authority for tactical override. Admiral Richardson has ordered immediate engagement of bogey aircraft showing targeting behavior. Jessica keyed the microphone again, her voice steady and professional. Falcon Leader, confirm aircraft configuration and weapon status. Have the bogies actually fired on your position or merely achieved target lock? Targeting radar alone does not constitute hostile action under Rules of Engagement Section 4-2. The pilot's response was immediate. Phoenix, negative on weapons fire. Bogies are maintaining formation at 2-mile separation with active targeting radar, but no missile launch detected. They appear to be shadowing our flight pattern. Jessica continued her tactical assessment. Falcon Leader, execute defensive spread formation and maintain visual contact. Do not paint them with your own targeting systems unless they show weapons release. This situation requires threat confirmation before engagement authorization. Admiral Richardson's angry voice cut across the frequency. Who is this Phoenix call sign? All pilots will follow my direct orders for immediate engagement. I am the commanding officer of this installation. Jessica maintained her grip on the radio handset as Admiral Richardson's demand for identification echoed through the shelter. She keyed the transmission with unwavering confidence. Admiral, this is Captain Jessica Chun, call sign Phoenix, providing tactical guidance under emergency authority protocols. Your engagement order violates established rules of engagement for unconfirmed threats. The Admiral's response was immediate and furious. Captain Chun, you are being discharged from this installation for incompetence. You have no authority to countermand my tactical decisions during combat operations. Jessica ignored the Admiral's anger and focused on the pilots who needed proper guidance. Falcon Leader, confirm your current altitude and fuel status. We need to establish whether these aircraft are conducting reconnaissance or preparing for actual attack patterns. Falcon Leader responded with professional precision. Phoenix, we're at Angels 22 with approximately 40 minutes of fuel remaining. The bogies are maintaining exact altitude match and have not deviated from formation since initial contact. Jessica analyzed the tactical information quickly. Falcon Leader, that flight pattern indicates intelligence gathering rather than attack preparation. Maintain defensive posture, but do not lock weapon systems. Execute communication attempts on NATO standard frequencies before any escalation. The radio operator stared at Jessica with growing amazement as she demonstrated expert knowledge of aerial combat protocols. The security guards exchanged uncertain glances, clearly confused about whether they should continue treating her as a discharged officer. Admiral Richardson's voice returned with barely controlled rage. All personnel, ignore any instructions from Phoenix call sign. Captain Chun is not qualified for tactical command and is being removed from this base for performance deficiencies. Jessica keyed the microphone again, her voice calm but authoritative. Falcon Leader, reference your tactical manual section 12- for regarding threat escalation procedures. Have you attempted standard identification queries using international aviation frequencies? The pilot's response showed immediate understanding. Phoenix, negative on international frequency attempts. We've only used military channels. Switching to civilian air traffic control frequency for identification request. Within moments, Falcon Leader's voice returned with notable relief. Phoenix, the bogies are responding on civilian frequency. They identify as Norwegian Air Force conducting authorized training exercise. They're transmitting proper NATO identification codes now. The shelter erupted in murmurs as personnel realized how close they had come to an international incident. Jessica handed the microphone back to the radio operator, her emergency intervention complete. The heavy footsteps approaching the emergency shelter announced the arrival of senior command personnel before they appeared in the doorway. Base Commander Colonel Martinez entered with his aide, his expression grave as he surveyed the scene. His eyes immediately found Jessica standing near the communications equipment. Colonel Martinez addressed the room with unmistakable authority. I need to speak with whoever used the Phoenix call sign during the recent tactical intervention. That officer prevented what could have been a catastrophic engagement with Allied forces. The radio operator pointed toward Jessica without hesitation. Sir, it was Captain Chun. She took control of the situation when Admiral Richardson ordered immediate engagement of the unidentified aircraft. Colonel Martinez studied Jessica with growing recognition, his eyes focusing on details that others had missed. Captain Chun, your call sign Phoenix rings familiar from classified operational reports. What unit were you assigned to before this base transfer? Jessica straightened to full military bearing as she responded. Sir, I was assigned to the 27th Fighter Squadron at Langley Air Force Base, serving as a Top Gun instructor pilot with specialized training in threat assessment and rules of engagement protocols. The colonel's expression shifted dramatically as the implications became clear. The 27th Fighter Squadron handles our most classified air superiority missions. Phoenix was the call sign mentioned in several commendation reports for exceptional performance during joint NATO exercises. Admiral Richardson entered the shelter at that moment, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Colonel Martinez, I demand immediate disciplinary action against Captain Chun for interfering with my tactical command during combat situation. Colonel Martinez turned toward the Admiral with barely concealed displeasure. Admiral Richardson, your tactical command nearly resulted in shooting down Norwegian Air Force aircraft conducting authorized training exercises. Captain Chin's intervention prevented an international incident that would have required explanation to NATO command. The shelter remained silent as the confrontation unfolded between senior officers. Jessica maintained her military bearing while base personnel watched with fascination, finally understanding the true scope of what had just occurred. Colonel Martinez continued his assessment. Admiral, I'm curious why a Top Gun instructor with Captain Chen's qualifications was being processed for discharge without proper review procedures. Her service record indicates exceptional performance ratings across all categories. Admiral Richardson's face reddened as he faced Colonel Martinez's pointed questions about the discharge proceedings. Colonel, Captain Chen has demonstrated clear insubordination and lacks the physical capabilities required for advanced fighter operations. Her discharge was based on comprehensive evaluation of her fitness for duty. Colonel Martinez pulled out his secure communication device and began accessing classified personnel databases. Admiral, I'm reviewing Captain Chen's complete service record now, including sections that require special clearance to access. Let me read you some interesting details. The colonel's voice carried growing authority as he continued. Captain Jessica Chen, call sign Phoenix, graduated first in her class from Top Gun with the highest scores recorded in air-to-air combat simulation. She holds instructor certifications in F-22 Raptor systems, advanced threat assessment, and NATO Joint Operations protocols. Jessica watched as the Admiral's confident expression began to falter. The base personnel in the shelter leaned forward, finally understanding the magnitude of the situation they had witnessed. Colonel Martinez continued reading from the classified files. Captain Chen has logged over 3,000 hours in F-22 operations, including classified missions in restricted airspace. She holds commendations from Norwegian, British, and German Air Force commanders for exceptional performance during joint training exercises. The security guards who had been escorting Jessica stepped back respectfully, their earlier dismissive attitudes completely transformed. The radio operator stared with obvious admiration at the officer whose expertise had just prevented an international crisis. Admiral Richardson attempted to maintain his position despite the mounting evidence. Colonel, regardless of past performance, Captain Chen's recent psychological evaluations indicated unsuitability for continued service. The discharge was based on current fitness assessments. Colonel Martinez's expression hardened as he accessed additional records. Admiral, I see no psychological evaluations in Captain Chen's file dated within the past 18 months. Her most recent fitness report shows exemplary ratings in all categories, signed by her previous commanding officer. The colonel turned his attention to Jessica with obvious respect. Captain Chen, can you explain why Admiral Richardson believed you were unfit for service when your official record shows consistently superior performance ratings? Jessica maintained her professional composure as she responded. Sir, I believe there may have been confusion regarding my request for transfer to the Pentagon liaison position. Admiral Richardson interpreted this as seeking to avoid flight duties rather than accepting a promotion to headquarters staff coordination. Colonel Martinez closed his secure device and faced Admiral Richardson with unmistakable authority. Admiral, I'm ordering an immediate suspension of Captain Chen's discharge proceedings pending a full investigation into procedural violations. Her Pentagon transfer request was approved by Joint Chiefs of Staff 3 weeks ago. The Admiral's face went pale as the implications became clear. Colonel, I was not informed of any approved transfer requests. Captain Chen's personnel file showed only a discharge recommendation based on performance concerns. Colonel Martinez's voice carried dangerous precision. Admiral, the Pentagon transfer approval required your signature as base commander. Either you signed documents without reading them, or you deliberately ignored direct orders from Joint Chiefs regarding Captain Chen's reassignment. Jessica remained at attention while the confrontation unfolded, watching as base personnel realized the scope of the Admiral's misconduct. The security guards who had escorted her now stood respectfully distant, their earlier dismissive behavior replaced by obvious embarrassment. The radio operator approached Jessica hesitantly. Captain, I want to apologize for my earlier behavior. I had no idea about your qualifications or call sign reputation. Your tactical intervention saved us from a serious international incident. Master Sergeant Rodriguez entered the shelter and immediately sought out Jessica. Captain Chen, I owe you a formal apology. My comments during your escort were completely inappropriate for addressing a Top Gun instructor. Your Phoenix call sign is legendary among flight line personnel. Colonel Martinez continued his systematic dismantling of the Admiral's actions. Admiral Richardson, I'm also concerned about your tactical command during today's crisis. Ordering immediate engagement without threat confirmation violates every rules of engagement protocol we follow. The shelter filled with murmurs as personnel discussed the dramatic reversal they were witnessing. Chief Petty Officer Davis approached with obvious shame. Captain, my crew and I made terrible assumptions about your capabilities. We should have shown proper respect regardless of your assignment. Admiral Richardson made one final attempt to salvage his position. Colonel Martinez, my decisions were based on information available at the time. Captain Chin's appearance and demeanor suggested someone unsuited for high-stress combat operations. Colonel Martinez's response was swift and final. Admiral, your judgment failures during both the discharge proceedings and today's tactical crisis demonstrate clear incompetence in command responsibilities. You will report to headquarters for immediate review of your fitness for continued service. 3 weeks later, Captain Jessica Chun stood in the Pentagon briefing room, wearing her dress blues with newly added commendation ribbons. Colonel Martinez had recommended her for exceptional service during the Norwegian incident, and Joint Chiefs had fast-tracked her promotion review. General Harrison, the Pentagon liaison coordinator, addressed the assembled staff officers. Captain Chin's tactical expertise prevented what could have been a catastrophic breakdown in NATO relations. Her Phoenix call sign will now coordinate all international training exercise communications. Jessica accepted the new position with quiet pride, knowing her expertise would help prevent similar incidents across multiple air bases. The irony was not lost on her that Admiral Richardson's attempt to discharge her had ultimately led to her most prestigious assignment. The briefing room door opened as Falcon leader, Major Thompson, entered wearing his flight suit. Captain Chun, I wanted to personally thank you for your guidance during the Norwegian situation. Your tactical knowledge saved my career and possibly prevented an international crisis. Major Thompson continued with obvious respect. Ma'am, the entire squadron has requested permission to display Phoenix call sign patches in honor of your intervention. Your quick thinking and protocol knowledge exemplify what Top Gun training should produce. Jessica smiled as she accepted the squadron patch bearing her Phoenix call sign. Major, I'm honored by your squadron's recognition. Remember that proper rules of engagement exist to protect both our forces and our allies from unnecessary conflicts. General Harrison concluded the ceremony with final announcements. Captain Chun, your Pentagon position includes oversight of all NATO joint exercise protocols. You'll be working directly with international Air Force commanders to establish improved communication procedures. As the ceremony ended, Jessica received a secure message on her communication device. Admiral Richardson had been formally relieved of command and reassigned to administrative duties pending full investigation of his procedural violations and tactical judgment failures. The message also included commendations from Norwegian Air Force Command, thanking her for preventing an incident that could have damaged decades of cooperative military relationships. Her Phoenix call sign had become synonymous with professional excellence and international cooperation. Jessica walked through the Pentagon corridors with renewed purpose, knowing her experience at Naval Air Station Oceana had prepared her for this crucial role. She had transformed a near disaster into an opportunity to strengthen military protocols and international partnerships. Her new office overlooked the flight line, where F-22 Raptors conducted training missions under improved safety procedures that she would help develop and implement across all NATO air bases.